Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The Package Tourist, hosted by yours truly, The Package Tourist and the magical mystery tour called Life, Matthew DiBiase. Tonight's guest is author Nancy Colier. Nancy is a psychotherapist, author, thought leader, interfaith minister, and public speaker. A longtime student of Eastern spirituality, she is the author of The Emotionally Exhausted Woman, which came out in 2022, Can't Stop Thinking in 2021, The Power of Off, which came out in 2016, Inviting a Monkey to Tea, which came out in 2012, and Getting Out of Your Own Way, which was released in 2001. Nancy is a national speaker and thought leader on women's empowerment, well-being, mindful technology, and relationship issues. She has been featured on Good Morning America, The New York Times, and countless other media. She is also a regular blogger for Psychology Today. In addition, Nancy spent 25 years as a top-ranked equestrian on the National Horse Circuit show circuit and serves as a performance consultant to competitive athletes, professional artists, and corporate executives. She is available for public speaking, workshops, and psychotherapy. Nancy, welcome to the show. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here. I would like
Delighted to be here.
Thank you. Nancy, I'd like to start off by asking you, you are a longtime student of Eastern spirituality. Is there a specific Eastern religion that you study, or has your research encompassed all the Eastern faiths?
Primarily Buddhist, I would say. Buddhist in something called non-duality, which comes out of Hinduism and Vedanta, but I've studied all of them, but I would say primarily a Buddhist non-dual approach.
Okay. What Eastern spiritual tenets are the most helpful when it comes to treating your patients?
That's a great question. Gosh, there's so much wisdom in it. But one of the primary aspects of the Eastern philosophy that I follow is awareness. That it's about building our awareness of our own mind and what our mind is up to, and creating some compassionate distance from what your mind is producing. And so there isn't an assumption of truth with the thoughts that are constantly generated. There isn't an immediate acceptance of the stories your mind is telling you. It's to start to notice this crazy monkey mind that lives in the human being. So that's one thing. And to become more and more aware of what's arising in ourselves so we can live more compassionately. The second that has always grabbed me is a sense of basic goodness in every human being. That's the basic starting place of Buddhist philosophy, is that we are made of goodness, and that's Buddha nature, or whatever you call it. But and so there is an assumption that even when bad behavior happens, it's coming from ignorance. It doesn't mean we accept it, and it doesn't mean we like it, but there is a sense that the human being is inherently good. And if I were to name another, I would say that a deep sense of self-compassion and compassion for others, that is our secret sauce. You know, there is just a sense of kindness that pervades, that I bring, hopefully, to my client, a sense of compassion for their experience. And understanding that most people's experience, once again, is coming from fear, or it's coming from survival instinct or ignorance. So it's not coming from malice, generally.
Okay. When you were talking about awareness, it kind of sparked a new question in my mind. Is awareness could be seen as also a form of self-honesty? Being aware is also looking and gazing upon yourself honestly, because if you're not honest with yourself, then how can you live a normal emotional life? I mean, is that another form of self-honesty, do you believe?
100%, yes. Awareness is more than anything else about awareness of our own process. It's self-awareness. So life gets much more interesting and rich when we're not just projecting or defending or completely unaware of what's actually happening inside. So if somebody is repeating a behavior, let's say, that triggers something early on in your experience, there's an awareness that can say, wow, this is bringing up this, and then we can act more mindfully. We can act more wisely with discernment. Awareness is primarily of self.
Okay. Nancy, as a psychotherapist, what traumas are you confronting the most these days when treating your patients? What is the most predominant trauma that you're facing and confronting today as a psychotherapist?
Sure. Well, what I'm confronting primarily today is a lot of anxiety, a lot of tremendous anxiety about our world and the uncertainty. Human beings, we don't do well with uncertainty. So we fill it in. We either fill it in with certain disaster, which at least is known, or we fill it in with some sort of la-la land, or we have to write some kind of storyline to get ourselves out of not knowing. But where we are right now with so many different situations, people are coming to me overwhelmed, and without that basic sense of groundedness, of things will be okay. We seem to have lost that in the last sort of 10 years or so.
Yes.
Something feels very unstable.
Yes. Nancy, as a national speaker and thought leader on women's empowerment, what is your sense of the state of the American woman, and by extension, the state of the young American girl as of today?
Well, it's something that I am very, very active in assisting the state of the young woman particularly. But I actually find, despite all of the media going on and all of it, I find women far more interested in waking up to their own truth, waking up to their own uniqueness, and not living so much in relation to how they're perceived or the object they are in other people's lives. What I'm seeing, and of course it's the people that, come to all my workshops and read my books, but is this great desire for women, for one thing, to get off this endless treadmill of how can I be better, and, who should I be versus who I want, this understanding of self-care, that self-care is mani-pedis, and to really craving and seeking a deeper and more authentic experience of living. As Mary Oliver says, they're one wild and precious life. Women are just driven right now to come into themselves and get out of the conditioning, who we've been taught to be, so that they can find out, well, who am I as my own self?
Okay. So, Nancy, do you feel that there is a hope for the American woman, and by extension, all young American girls, based on what you just told me?
I think there's great hope. I'm an incredibly optimistic person. What's worrisome to me, I will say, with the way young, and this is not just women, but young folks are coming up is, and I write a lot about it, is what social media is doing to them. I have seen firsthand in many different environments a vastly different kind of young person who has, this is going to sound extreme, but sort of lost the capacity to think and lost the interest, particularly in thinking, because, again, technology can do so much for us, and also that there's been a flip in terms of their self-experiences through this, how many followers I have, or how I'm perceived, my image, and that's a very disturbing shift to me. They're more interested in being viewed as something than they are with living the experience of that. So everything is outside in now. And I think it's fundamentally changing our consciousness that is not for the better. And the people that are under the most stress right now and most anxious and most depressed and lost are young folks who somehow have become passive entities in their lives and just being entertained and distracted all the time.
Mm-hmm. Actually,
I'm worried about our young folks.
Yes, I concur. Actually, I don't feel that your view is extreme. Actually, I concur with your conclusions heartily. I concur.
Mm-hmm.
In your
I just think it's a terrible experiment that we've done with our young folks as guinea pigs, and we've not helped them.
Yeah. In a sense, perhaps you could say social media has begotten Lucifer in certain ways, would you think?
It's brought out something very scary in us, and a certain level of unkindness, because, of course, we're not talking to the human being, we're talking to the screen, and we have completely depersonalized the interaction, so it doesn't, our words don't, we don't have a connection anymore with the effects of our words on a human heart or a human mind. We are becoming kind of not inherently good. It's bringing out a part of ourselves that's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm. In your books, Getting Out of Your Own Way and Inviting a Monkey to Tea, you talk about overcoming the internal and external demands for perfection, which leads to anxiety and depression. Do you feel that those individuals that always demand perfection from others use it as a weapon to manipulate and control?
The primary way I see that drive for perfection is against ourselves, where there is little forgiveness for our humanness and a sort of demand about who we should be that's really not based on the whole sort of miracle and catastrophe that we all are. So it keeps demanding, in a sense, that reality be something that reality isn't, which is flawed and perfect and imperfect. It's a very young way of being, but it is generally, well, not generally, but often around avoiding shame. So, because to allow, hey, I made a mistake, or sometimes I'm a beginner, or sometimes I'm imperfect and I don't, hit the mark, that brings up so much shame and makes us feel so bad about ourselves. We don't have this sort of ego strength to allow that, or suddenly that's how we are identified. We're that person who failed. Now we're a failure, as opposed to we're good, and within that, this time we missed the mark and we're going to learn from it. That sort of self-acceptance and self-compassion and forgiveness of our humanness, when we demand that not be, it's losing cause, because fight with reality wins, but it's also quite young, right? Black and white.
So in a sense, the greatest enemy we have to face is ourselves. So basically, the greatest opponent is overcoming ourselves. Is that correct?
I wouldn't ever say that we are an enemy. I would say that it's our relationship with our own humanness that ultimately is what needs to heal for us to get out of our own way. We're probably the most unkind to ourselves more than anyone else.
Okay. Nancy, please explain to our audience the metaphorical meaning of your book title, Inviting a Monkey to Tea.
Sure. So in Buddhist philosophy, the mind, as I said, is considered a monkey. We call it like a monkey, like a sort of bouncing around and wild. Often people will say it's a monkey that's been stung by a bee and drank a bottle of wine. So it's wild. And what I encourage in that book and what I teach and give you practical steps for is how to befriend your mind. So even when your mind is shouting at you or telling you how, catastrophizing life and scaring you and doing that ultimately, if we can bring it in, and like Rumi's Guest House poem, give it a seat at the table. Let me hear from you. What are you afraid of that you're coming up with this scenario? The more that we try and eliminate the mind, the more it'll battle down the door and come in. So the first step is seeing the mind is just a mind. It's a wild monkey. We're born with it. So what can we learn from it? But if we're not fully identified with what it's saying, then it can sit at our table. We can be curious about it. We can say, that's not true, what you're telling me, or stop terrifying me, or stop telling me that I'm going to fail, or we can talk to it. But ultimately, we want to see it as just, a part of being a human. You're not doing anything wrong that it's shouting crazy things at you.
Nancy, you also do public speaking. When you give your speeches today, what are the main themes that you touch upon when you speak in this present times?
At the moment, I'm giving several different talks. One is for women specifically to trust that they can tell their truth and be honest, even when it feels really threatening and scary. And helping women, again, return to an internal experience of themselves rather than just trying to be what will be well perceived. And really teaching women to claim their own lives. What do I want, right? I've been taught to abandon my own wants because it keeps me safe. So I teach women how to be the subjects of their own lives. And that's very different than being an object perceived one way or another. And to get inside their bodies and trust their intuition and not keep overriding it. So I'm teaching that program and in individual talks. And then I'm teaching for my new book, which comes out November 1st, which is Narratives Let Go of the Stories That Keep You Stuck, is again to teach people how, and there's, a lot of interest in this particular talk at the moment, how we so want to change, so many people feel stuck, and yet getting better and more mindful about the stories we're telling ourselves, once again, in our own mind. What's the narrative we're creating, which then we go out in the world and recreate. We go find the evidence to support that version of ourselves, and we sort of throw ourselves in jail with our narrative and throw away the key because we've already proven to ourselves, whether it's through distorting reality, only looking for certain realities, or just seeing, taking the 1% of what's happened and using that as all the evidence. We keep confirming our story to ourselves, and very often our story is the exact opposite of what we want. So I talk about that, and also how that plays out in relationships, where we lock in our partner into a certain identity, or we project, this is my experience of such and such, and so that must be their experience, and therefore I'm assigning them intentions, all which would be fine, but then we respond to other people based on this very often faulty story that comes from our conditioning and our wounds and our thoughts, opinions, blah, 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 blah. But it's not actually reality. So I'm teaching people how to get their story off reality so they can be in the truth a bit more and let someone else tell them their truth. Okay. Right? So this is But when you start living this way with awareness of your own narratives about yourself, about other people, about the world, we're crafting our lived experience, our reality, all the time based on the past. And nothing new can happen. So I'm teaching that right now. And then I'm also teaching a couple workshops on obsessive thinking. So we, again, with this thinking and thinking and thinking and ruminating and overthinking.
Yeah.
And how we're never in the present moment. So how to come back to this present moment.
Okay. Now, Nancy, you are a performance consultant for competitive athletes. Now, I know you can't name any of your patients, but generally, in what competitive sports in general have you counseled athletes, and what typical issues do you handle with regards to those athletes?
Yeah, sure. So I was, as you said, a long-time equestrian, still ride, but it was the focus of my life for many, many years, and so I work with a lot of equestrians, and I work with golfers. I work with individual sports, generally tennis players, people who, we're out there on our own with riders. It's also with the horse, but with our own mind. And it's a very different dynamic when you bring in a team. So I've always specialized in individual sports.
Okay.
But I would say that what we've been talking about applies in the sense of what am I not aware of? Most top athletes have the skill to win, but the difference is what's happening in their mind. What are they doing with that skill? Their bodies can do it, but what again are the narratives that they're telling themselves, and how are they responding to their stress or their anxiety or the story they're telling themselves? If they miss a shot, for example, have they already written themselves out of the game as, you see, this is what you always do, you can't, you clutch, blah, 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 or are they coming back to the present moment and the next ball? Makes a radical difference in how not only we experience that sport, the joy we get from it, but also how much we win. So I work with people about their own mind. What's their mind doing to them?
Okay. Nancy, out of curiosity, you are yourself an equestrian. What do you do, like dressage or jumping? What do you do?
Hunters. Yeah, jumping, but in the hunter ring. So that's the part of jumping where you judge for form and confirmation and all of that. You jump over a bunch of jumps in a course, but rather than jumpers, which go for time and knockdowns and all of that, we go for style.
Okay.
So you teach a horse how to jump in a certain way that is, the high-performance way to jump. And it make it look effortless, of course.
Okay, so more aesthetic in that ten instead of beating the clock then. Okay. Okay. Now, you're also a performance consultant for professional artists. What are the typical issues a professional artist confronts that requires your counseling in general?
Yeah, in general. Gosh, there's so many.
What's the main one? The main ones you face.
The main one I would say is, there are a few. One is confidence. Really this imposter syndrome is real. Believing that they can actually get the job, and holding on to a sense of self-worth and why I'm doing this in the face of so much rejection. And then sort of walking this very strange walk once success has happened, where the relationships they have with other people, they become this object. And yet inside themselves, it's very disorienting. They are the same person, but it's managing that sort of imaginary version of themselves that gets projected onto them, and they get responded to as a character in other people's movies. I'm talking about in other people's minds.
Yeah.
And so the loneliness of that comes up a lot. But the confidence to trust that they can be successful, and not writing that into absurdity, not making fun of themselves, if you will.
Okay. Nancy, let's talk about you now. Where were you born and raised?
In Manhattan.
Okay. What did your parents do for a living?
They were in psychology, both of them, and my dad was a painter as well. So he retired from being a doctor after, some time, and then painted. Well, that's what he did. And my mom was a psychologist as well, and a writer.
So, where did you go to college?
Where I went to college, I went to two colleges. I went to the University of Pennsylvania,
Ooh.
and then I transferred to the University of Virginia. And then I went to grad school at Columbia and went to a bunch of institute trainings, and then that was the beginning.
So, what led you to become a psychotherapist and a writer?
I don't know if we choose to be a writer, honestly. I write because it's how I process life. So if I'm curious about something, or I see it in my practice, or whatever it might be, I write it to, in a sense, find language and for what I'm seeing and to understand it more deeply. And always written. I mean, I've just always written. And to be a psychotherapist, I think I'm just empathically wired. I'm curious about people's experience. I'm not in fixing them. I assume my patients are well and trust their knowing. I work with, very aware folks, and so I'm there to ask good questions so they find their own truth. I'm not there to give them a diagnosis, judge them, or any of that. I'm just there to open some windows and ask really good questions so they find their truth. Because I would never have the arrogance to imagine I know what's best for another human. They know.
Okay. Nancy, whenever I interview an author, I always love to ask the standard question. When you were growing up, who were your favorite authors? And of those favorite authors, did any of them light the spark inside you to become a writer or perhaps influence your writing style?
Oh, my goodness, that's such a great question. I will say, when I was young, I mean, I don't know where you want to place it because there's so many I've always read. I love to read. But, and that's another thing that's sort of dying in our young folks, right? If we can watch it on YouTube, we will not read it. But, and they're radically different experiences, of course. But when I was really young, I read a lot of Nancy Drew. I think I read every single Nancy Drew. I loved figuring it out, the mystery. And then I loved Judy Blume. I don't know any girl growing up in America who did not. And I think one of the first novels I read very young, that also sparked me was Scott Odell's Island of the Blue Dolphins. Very young, I read that, the Narnia Chronicles. And Sue Monk Kidd was one of the first novels I read. Those were more grown up, The Mermaid Chair. So lots and lots of books. And then I moved into more spiritual reading and some teachers like Pema Chodron and Adyashanti and Gangaji and some people that are in my spiritual pursuits. They opened such incredible doors. And I recently read a book that I thought was so powerful called All Fours by Miranda July, and Anything by Elizabeth Strout. It's so hard to name. I think I read because I just cannot believe how lucky we are that we get to read. And what a delight. It's just such a privilege to read a book. for whatever reason, to go on a journey or to learn something. It's remarkable to me. And so I read because I love it, and I write because I kind of have to. And I guess I love that too.
Nancy, please tell our listeners, where can readers find your books?
Sure, yes. Wherever books are sold, so Amazon, Barnes & Noble, blah, 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 anywhere that they sell books. My books are there, and my website is Nancy Colier with one L. Everyone thinks it's two. .com. Okay. And so you can find out all where my workshops are and so on there.
Okay.
And also, you can go on Psychology Today or Substack, where I write a regular blog.
Okay, now your upcoming book, Narratives, Let Go of the Stories That Keep You Stuck, comes out November 1st, correct? This year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Now, after that book comes out, do you have any idea what your next book project might be and when we could expect its release?
Well, here's the thing. One of the things I teach a lot is, and this is directly out of personal experience, is resisting the urge to what's next myself. So I lived a lot, it's partially how I got so much done, but I was constantly asking, what's next, what's next, what's next, and that completely kidnapped my present moment. So I have been writing for so long that I 100% trust my own curiosity and what will bubble up after I do all of the touring and everything for this new book. Life will present something that's alive and zesty and confusing and wants more attention from me. So I find, just in my own practice, I really resist the urge to what's next myself, because I find it's never helpful for me.
That's an interesting perspective. I'm criticized. I'm intrigued by that, because I have a confession that I'm very much an expert. I mean, I've got ideas of when my next few books are for the next 8 years, so it's not very funny. So forgive me for that. Maybe I want to rethink my thinking and all that. Okay.
Well, it's a great relief to look at what's here rather than what's next.
Okay.
I find that to be incredibly relieving. So give it a whirl.
Okay. Nancy, when your next thing comes out, please let me know. I would love to have you on my show again. It's wonderful having you here.
Absolutely. It's been a delight to talk with you. Thank
you take care. Okay. Bye-bye. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for next week's show, where I will be interviewing author Greg Stout. And I would just like to remind my listeners once again that my latest book release, Patriarchs of the Dugout, Baseball's Greatest Managers, is available at Amazon, either in paperback or in Kindle. Just type in my name, Matthew DiBiase, MattheW DiBiase, and you will see it. Patriarchs of the Dugout, Baseball's Greatest Managers. It's on sale at 25% off and will remain on sale for the remainder of the baseball season. So go out and buy it. If you're into baseball and you want to know who the 50 greatest managers of all time are, please buy my book, because it answers that question. Thank you and good night.